Hi everyone, I'm Kelly O'Horo, and this is Adaptable, Behavior Explained. Hi everybody, welcome back to Adaptable, the show where we help you navigate life's challenges with greater awareness, resilience, and compassion for not just yourself but others. Today we're continuing our series on infidelity, and we're going to tackle one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding affairs. Affairs are not always about sex. In fact, for many people, the driving force behind an affair has far more to do with attachment, emotional wounds, unmet needs, and the deep human desire for connection than it does with physical intimacy. So before we dive in, let me be very clear. Understanding why affairs happen is not the same thing as excusing them. That's not what we're doing here. My goal today is to help you understand the psychology underneath the behavior so that healing, accountability, and growth can even become possible. If you've been betrayed, if you've had an affair, or if you've simply are just trying to understand why relationships sometimes unravel in unexpected ways, this show is for you. So let me start with a question. What if the affair wasn't actually about wanting someone else? What if it was about desperately wanting a version of yourself that you no longer felt connected to? Maybe it's a version that felt seen or chosen, desired, important, wanted, alive. Because when we look through the lens of attachment theory, many affairs begin not in the bedroom, but in loneliness, emotional disconnection, and unresolved wounds. So when we reduce affairs to they just wanted sex, we miss the opportunity to understand what was really happening underneath. There's always a why. That's what we do with this show. And without understanding the root cause, healing becomes much harder. So whether you're rebuilding trust after infidelity or trying to prevent it from happening in your own relationship, understanding attachment dynamics can completely change the conversation. And I will tell you that I have worked with couples that have been through this, and they have been willing to put in the hard work and the grit. And when they come out on the other side, they're better than some of the healthiest marriages that I've ever seen, because they're willing to look at the hard truths about what caused their pain in the first place. So let's start with the basics. Attachment theory tells us that human beings are wired for connection. This isn't up for debate. From infancy onward, we learn how safe relationships feel if we were lucky enough to have attuned, caring, and loving parents. We develop attachment styles that influence how we connect, communicate, trust, and seek closeness, and have a sense of self in the world. Generally speaking, we see 4 attachment styles, and please check out my whole playlist on attachment because I think everybody should really learn this in high school, to be honest. Secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and fearful or avoidant attachment, or sometimes called disorganized attachment. These styles don't determine our fate, but they can heavily influence how we respond when relationships become strained. When attachment needs go unmet over time, people often begin searching, consciously or unconsciously, for ways to soothe that pain. And sometimes those strategies are really unhelpful. So let's talk a little bit about affairs and attachment strategies specifically. This is where things get really interesting because many affairs aren't simply about attraction. They function as attachment strategies or maladaptive adaptations. The affair becomes a way to regulate emotions, cope with loneliness, manage feelings of rejection, or escape emotional pain. For example, someone who feels unseen at home may become deeply attached to a person who listens attentively in other places of their life. Someone who feels criticized might gravitate towards a person who offers admiration. Someone struggling with self-worth may become addicted to the validation that comes from being desired. The affair partner often represents something emotionally significant, not because they're necessarily a better partner, but because they temporarily soothe an attachment wound. So let's talk now about the need beneath that behavior. One of the questions that I often ask clients is, what need was the affair meeting? Or what source was this helping to heal? Again, it's not about justification. It's about understanding and getting curious. Common needs can include feeling valued, feeling desired, feeling emotionally safe, feeling understood, feeling important, feeling appreciated, feeling alive and connected or excited. And when people don't recognize these needs in themselves, they often seek them outside of a relationship. So the problem is that the affairs provide this temporary relief, not lasting healing. It's a little bit like a Band-Aid on a broken ankle. It's emotional pain medication, but it's not true recovery. And ultimately, it will cause a lot more pain in everybody involved because really not anyone can win when this happens. So why the affair can feel so powerful is what we're going to talk about next. Many betrayed partners struggle with a painful question. Why did they seem so attached to the affair partner? And the answer often lies in the neurobiology and attachment. Affairs frequently exist outside of pressures of daily life. It's a little bit like fiction. There's no bills, there's no planning, there's no parenting responsibilities, no household conflicts or who needs to do what in our list of things that have to get done. There's no decades of accumulated resentment. Instead, there's novelty and excitement, anticipation, validation, and oftentimes fantasy. And the brain releases powerful chemicals associated with that reward and attachment. What develops can feel incredibly intense, but intensity is not the same thing as intimacy. Because intimacy requires someone to see into you, into me you see. And fantasy is not the same thing as genuine connection. Many people confuse the emotional high that's created by an affair with finding a soulmate. And in reality, they're often experiencing just relief from pain, not evidence of a healthier relationship. So now we're going to talk about the betrayed partner's experience. And let's pause here because I never want conversations about attachment to overlook the pain of the betrayal that you experienced. For the betrayed partner, infidelity creates an attachment injury, and it's incredibly traumatic. The person who was supposed to be your safest person and place suddenly becomes the source of profound hurt. It can create hypervigilance, anxiety, intrusive thoughts, loss of trust, identity struggles, emotion dysregulation. And many people describe it as trauma because the relationship itself no longer feels safe. This is why healing requires much, much more than simply ending an affair. Trust has to be rebuilt, safety has to be restored, and attachment must be repaired. There is a possibility for true healing, but it requires accountability. One of the greatest misconceptions about attachment is that understanding wounds removes responsibility, and it just doesn't. Every affair involves choices, and understanding the reasons behind those choices simply helps us prevent future harm. We have to recognize the root cause of our decisions and our behaviors for us to not repeat those patterns. And healthy healing requires honest accountability, transparency, emotional maturity, exploring your unmet needs and figuring out what the heck happened and what was going on that made me stray. Understanding attachment patterns and how my wiring was not being met, my needs were not being met. And so learning healthier relational skills, speaking up for my needs, talking about what's going wrong, how do I feel, and what's contributing to those feelings. When people ignore those deeper issues, the behavior often repeats itself in a future relationships. Not necessarily the same partner, sometimes different partner, same wounds, same outcome. So I tell clients, you will perhaps end a relationship, but if you move into the next relationship without cleaning up the baggage, you will bring the very same behaviors and adaptations and problems into the next relationship. So the real question that we need to be asking is pretty important. Why did this happen in the first place? What caused this person to have the affair? And the more transformative question is what was happening emotionally that made the affair seem like this is a good idea, this is the answer, and this is how I can feel better. When we ask that question, we begin moving away from shame and toward understanding, away from blame and toward healing, away from symptoms and toward root causes, which really are always the reason for every behavior. So if today's conversation resonated with you, here are 3 things that you can reflect on this week. You want to identify your core attachment needs. And to do this, you want to ask yourself, when do I feel most connected? When do I feel most disconnected? What emotional needs am I afraid to express? You want to practice honest communication. Start naming your needs directly rather than hoping others will figure them out. Healthy relationships thrive on clarity. Clear is kind, and not mind reading. You want to get curious about your patterns. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? Try asking, what is this behavior trying to protect me from? That question often opens the door to tremendous growth. Curiosity is the first place that we want to go when we're trying to understand the roots of our behaviors. So today we explored a powerful truth. Many affairs are not primarily driven by sex. They're driven by attachment needs, unmet emotional disconnection, validation seeking, and unresolved needs. That understanding does not excuse betrayal. Make no mistake, I'm not okay with that behavior. There's so much collateral damage, but it can help us understand that. And with understanding, there's a possibility to have hope and to have healing. And understanding is often where the start of healing has to begin. So whether you're recovering from infidelity, you're rebuilding trust, or simply working on strengthening your relationships, I hope today's conversation offered a deeper perspective and a little more compassion for the complicated nature of being human. If this episode was helpful, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave a review and share it with someone who might benefit from this conversation. And I'd love to hear from you. What was your biggest takeaway from today's episode? Leave a comment, send a message, or connect with me on social media, and let's continue this conversation. So thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, don't forget to lead with love. It'll never steer you wrong.